Have you ever lay awake at night, staring blankly at the dark ceiling, continuously replaying a minor conversation from your busy day? Perhaps you are deeply worrying about whether a coworker misunderstood your casual words, or if your close friend felt slighted by your tone of voice. We live in a fast-paced society that constantly forces us to look outwards for validation. We are thoroughly trained from a very young age to carefully read the atmosphere, to seamlessly mold ourselves, to safely fit into the heavy expectations of our parents, our strict bosses, and our observing peers. The heavy burden of wanting to be universally liked, or at the very least, wanting to safely avoid being disliked, quietly dictates almost every single decision we make. It dictates the subtle clothes we choose to wear, the demanding careers we pursue, and the honest words we anxiously swallow. But let us pause for a quiet moment and reflect sincerely. Is this endless, exhausting pursuit of external validation actually making us deeply happy? Or is it slowly draining our vital emotional energy, leaving us feeling hollow and profoundly exhausted at the end of each demanding day? We often desperately believe that if we just try a little bit harder, if we become a little more accommodating, we will finally earn the unconditional approval of everyone around us. This is a cruel in the desert. The raw truth is, constantly adjusting your inner moral compass to match the shifting magnetic pull of other people's unpredictable opinions is a guaranteed recipe for losing your own authentic sense of self. Today, I want to gently but firmly challenge this exhausting way of living. If you have been feeling the crushing weight of other people's invisible expectations, or if you quietly feel like you are living someone else's life out of a sense of duty and obligation, this quiet session is intimately dedicated to you. We are going to carefully explore a profound psychological perspective shift that might feel deeply uncomfortable at first glance, but ultimately offers a remarkable, lasting sense of emotional liberation. Welcome to BookDream. Let us take a deep breath, leave the noisy world outside, and turn the page together. To truly understand the deep root of this modern emotional exhaustion, we must gently turn to the profound wisdom embedded within the fascinating book The Courage to be Disliked. This beautifully written and accessible dialogue is deeply rooted in the brilliant philosophical teachings of Alfred Adler. Adler was a highly influential Austrian psychiatrist who stood proudly alongside Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, one of the three great intellectual giants of modern early psychology. However, unlike his incredibly famous contemporaries, Adler's perspective on human nature is drastically and wonderfully different. Most of us are inherently familiar with traditional Freudian psychology. Freud famously taught us the concept of etiology, the somewhat bleak idea that our present emotional state and our daily behaviors are entirely dictated by the unchangeable traumas and the heavy events of our distant past. If you are deeply anxious today, Freudian logic dictates it simply because something terribly unfortunate happened to you yesterday. It is a fundamentally deterministic worldview that often paints humans as helpless, fragile victims of their own unalterable histories. Alfred Adler, on the other hand, boldly and courageously rejects this limiting notion. He introduces us instead to the concept of teleology, the incredibly empowering psychological concept that we are not determined by our past objective experiences, but rather by the subjective meaning we actively choose to give them in the present moment. Adler forcefully argues that we do not suffer from the objective shock of our past traumatic experiences. Rather, we make whatever suits our present conscious purpose out of them. If you are terribly afraid of interacting with new people today, Adler suggests it is not merely because you were tragically bullied in the past. Instead, it is because you have subconsciously chosen the current, safer goal of avoiding interpersonal relationships in order to protect your fragile ego from the possibility of any future disappointment or rejection. This single, profound shift in psychological perspective hands the heavy steering wheel of your life firmly back into your own two hands. It whispers quietly that our life is not something that is passively and violently given to it by fate. Rather, it is a vast, blank, beautiful canvas that we are actively painting upon every single morning when we wake up. Let us carefully and slowly unpack the core insights that make Adler's unique philosophy so profoundly challenging and yet so deeply liberating for our tired souls. The first and perhaps most striking psychological assertion Adler makes is that all human problems, absolutely without any exception, are fundamentally interpersonal relationship problems. The very painful concepts of crushing inferiority, burning jealousy, and heavy existential dread only exist in our minds because there is always someone else out there to compare ourselves to. If you were truly the absolute only human being alive in the entire vast universe, the very nagging concept of loneliness or inadequacy would simply and instantly vanish into thin air. The second crucial philosophical insight is the truly life-altering daily practice called the separation of tasks. I want you to imagine a clear, thick, invisible boundary line separating your mind from the rest of the chaotic world. Adler quietly tells us that we must urgently learn to distinguish clearly between what is our personal task and what is clearly someone else's task. How you calmly choose to live your life, the moral values you bravely uphold, and the quiet honesty you speak into the dark are entirely your sacred tasks. However, how other people choose to unfairly judge you, whether they applaud your life decisions or whether they bitterly despise them, that is entirely and completely their task alone. It does not belong to you. The exact moment you anxiously cross that invisible boundary and attempt to hopelessly manage or manipulate someone else's private feelings about you, you immediately invite endless and unnecessary suffering into your fragile life. You are carrying luggage that does not belong to your journey. The third powerful insight is precisely where this notable book derives its provocative title. True, absolute human freedom, Adler argues, is simply the quiet courage to be disliked. It is the profound and peaceful realization that someone, somewhere in the world, will inevitably and predictably misunderstand your intentions. And you must deeply realize that this is perfectly okay. Being disliked by another human being is not the tragic sign of a failing moral character. Rather, it is the unmistakable and beautiful proof that you are finally living authentically, strictly according to your own steady inner compass, rather than desperately performing a tiring theatrical script written by a demanding society. So, how do we actively and practically bring this profound psychological freedom into the quiet, ordinary corners of our daily lives? The most powerful and immediate action you can take tomorrow morning is to start consciously practicing the strict separation of tasks in your everyday mundane conversation. Let us imagine a simple scenario. When you kindly offer a helpful suggestion to a struggling colleague at work, and they react with unexpected defensiveness or sharp coldness, stop yourself before your mind begins to anxiously spiral. Quietly and firmly recognize that offering the help with good intentions was your honorable task. You have fulfilled it. But how they actively choose to receive it, process it, and emotionally react to it entirely and completely their heavy burden to carry. Do not desperately reach across the invisible psychological fence to carry their emotional luggage for them. Let go of the heavy, exhausting need to desperately control their internal reaction. Similarly, when you bravely make a deeply personal and unconventional life decision, whether it is suddenly resigning from a prestigious but soul-crushing corporate job, or courageously choosing to pursue an unpopular passion in a strict society, you must mentally brace yourself for the inevitable judgment of others. Close friends might whisper, conservative relatives will strongly disapprove. When you inevitably feel the familiar, sharp sting of judgment, mentally draw that boundary line in the sand. Remind yourself gently but firmly, I have made a conscious decision perfectly aligned with my own truth. Their personal disappointment or anger is their unique task to gracefully manage, not mine. I must emphasize that this does not mean we suddenly become cold, arrogant, or completely callous towards the feelings of others. It simply means we respectfully stop living as exhausted, anxious hostages to their constantly fluctuating emotional states. By strictly refusing to interfere in the private psychological tasks of others, and absolutely not allowing them to aggressively interfere in yours, you will suddenly find that the vast, suffocating majority of your daily interpersonal stress simply evaporates like morning mist. You will instantly reclaim a tremendous, overflowing amount of vital mental energy that was previously completely wasted on trying to hopelessly control the uncontrollable. As we gently and beautifully bring our reflective intellectual journey to a close tonight, I want to leave you with a deeply liberating and warm thought to carry gently into your bright tomorrow. The incredibly heavy, invisible emotional armor you have been anxiously wearing all these long years, the constant, deeply exhausting vigilance of desperately trying to appease and please absolutely everyone around you, has finally served its protective purpose. It kept you relatively safe when you were young and vulnerable. But you are absolutely no longer that fragile, vulnerable person today. It is truly time to slowly, gently, and bravely take off that heavy, rusted armor. You must recognize that meaningful human relationships, in their absolute, truest, and most beautiful, enduring form, are never built on a fragile, trembling foundation of universal approval and constant people-pleasing. They are built on the solid, unshakable ground of quiet, authenticity, and deep mutual respect. Yes, bravely stepping into the blinding light of your own quiet truth means that you will inevitably and certainly face the uncomfortable friction of being actively disliked by someone out there. It is mathematically impossible to please the entire world. But I ask you to consider this important question. Is the exhausting, hollow, and superficial comfort of being universally liked truly worth the devastating, tragic price of slowly losing your own vibrant soul? Deeply realizing that you absolutely cannot control how others perceive you is not a sad message of despair. Rather, it is the ultimate, soaring declaration of your own personal independence. I invite you, very small tomorrow. Speak a quiet, honest truth you have been painfully holding back. Make a minor, simple choice purely for your own personal joy, completely regardless of what the noisy neighbors or colleagues might think. And when the inevitable, familiar feeling of social discomfort quickly arises in your chest, do not panic. Greet it like an old friend. That temporary discomfort is simply the necessary growing pains of your beautiful newfound freedom. If this quiet, sincere intellectual journey tonight has offered you a small window of comforting peace or a valuable new perspective to carry forward into your life, please consider hitting the subscribe button to join BookDream. We walk this beautiful path of continuous emotional reflection and literary discovery together every single week. May your quiet night be deeply peaceful, and may your bright tomorrow be lived with the quiet, beautiful, and unshakable courage to be entirely, unapologetically yourself. Thank you so much for listening.